Welcome to the Canadian Virtual Records meeting with the International Institute of Genealogical Studies, found at genealogicalstudies.com. I'm your host, Drew von Hasselbach, and I am speaking on Canadian naturalization records this evening. I'm a mentoring professor with the Institute, and I am here to help you in your genealogical journey. So I'm going to share my screen, uh, and we are going to discover Canadian naturalization records. Okay. All right. So I'm calling this presentation Come From Away, Finding Naturalization Records. The goal here is understanding the immigration laws and rules for naturalization in Canada in the early 1900s. So these are the things I'm hoping to go over. First, I want to introduce you to the basic rules for naturalization in the early 20th century Canada. Then I'm going to talk about some of the basic rules for early 20th century immigration in Canada. And then we're going to go through a little case study. We're going to learn how one Saskatchewan family became naturalized. In fact, we'll start with that fellow right here. When was Jake Hahn naturalized? Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead there. Naturalization in Canada, pre-World War One. The interesting thing, and perhaps the surprising thing you'll find about Canadian citizenship, is there was no such thing in Canada until 1947. Prior to 1947, people who landed in Canada, if they were gunning towards citizenship or what we would consider citizenship, their goal was to become a naturalized British subject. And becoming a naturalized British subject was there was a policy for this that went back deep into the 19th century. So after Canada was created in 1867, there was a way to become Canadian. To our mind and our way of thinking, it's very confusing because we have very clear notions of what citizenship is. If you're a citizen, you got a passport. You're a Canadian. You go places, you tell people you're Canadian, that means you're from Canada. But prior to 1947, when there was no such concept of Canadian citizenship, people who lived in Canada were actually British subjects. That was their legal status. Now, it was true, and it was the case that people traveling outside of Canada would call themselves Canadian. In fact, you can even find in the old census records that people will talk about being Canadian. Um, but it wasn't really a legal idea until 1947. So the world that we're about to encounter, um, if we look at, say, the Naturalization Act, the federal law of 1906, we can see some of the rules you had to follow. So if you landed in Canada after 1906 and before 1914, and you wanted to become what we would think of as a citizen of Canada, you had to live here for 3 years. You had to live in Canada for 3 years. There was a little process you could go through, a little legal process that involved filling in some forms and that sort of thing. You had to go to court and swear an oath of allegiance to the crown. And you would do this if you were male. So if you were male and you qualified to become a British subject, you became a British subject, and your children and your wives automatically became naturalized along with you. Now, 1914, um, Canada changed the rules a little bit. Instead of it being 3 years residency, you had to be resident for 5 years. And there was also some administrative things that they did that made the application process a little more clear. But basically, the concept was you had to prove that you had been living in the country for 3 years before 1914 and after 1914 for 5 years. Now, how did you actually become a citizen? See, nowadays we do have citizenship courts. You would go before a judge and you would swear your oath of allegiance to Canada, excuse me, before that judge, and you would obtain your Canadian citizenship. Back in the early 20th century, you would do this just in a local superior court. So the sort of court where they might also be doing lawsuits and more serious crimes. Those are the superior courts. You'd go before a judge and you'd swear an oath of allegiance to the crown and you'd get your papers. So let's look at how somebody became a citizen. In fact, we'll look at this fella here, Jake Hahn. His name's also spelled Han. When was he naturalized? Now, you'll know from your methodology courses that what we like to do when you have a nice, clear research question is you like to have that clear, simple question. When was Jake Han naturalized? Then the next step that you go through is you collect together the information that you have. And so I've already done this step forward for you. In this case, you have this fellow here with this kicking mustache. I love it. It's actually my great grandfather, I got to say. Um, he was born in Czernowitz, then Austria, around 1875. Later, after World War I, it became known as Romania. It became part of Romania, and today it sits on the border between Romania and Ukraine. But when he was born there, it was Austria. He was an ethnic German. He came to Canada in 1912, and I know that from some passenger lists. His wife was Margaret Runzer, and he had three sons and three daughters. His sons were Carl, I'm sorry, four sons and three daughters. His sons were Carl, George, Jake, and Rudolph, and his daughters were Betty, Kay, and Peggy. At least those are the names that I knew them as a as a child. Jake was my grandfather. Um, but Jake Hahn Sr., my great grandfather, he was a shoemaker in Regina. So he settled in Regina and he worked as a shoemaker. And you will see that he decided to become a naturalized British subject. I don't know why the computer just switched there. Oh, all right. Okay. So how are we going to go about tracking down Jake's naturalization records? Um, the methodology, I think, is pretty straightforward. There is a website on the Library and Archives of Canada. That's what I mean by LAC, the Library and Archives of Canada website. It has the naturalization database. You can plug in the names, you can do a search, and it will lead you to some information that might help you find some records. So yeah, you search the database, you see some search results. You collect the information from the search results, and you can use that information to track down the records. And I'm going to take you through this in a more granular way. So first, we would start by visiting the LAC's naturalization database. Um, there's the URL there. At the end of the class, I'll try and send you some handouts so you'll have this information. But I can tell you, if you just go to Google and you type Library and Archives of Canada naturalization lists, you don't even have to put in the years, but it's 1915 to 1951. You'll land on this screen. It'll look just like this, and you'll see there's this nice big blue button here that says search the database, which is what you want to do. The search window is very simple. It looks like this. You type in a surname, you type in a given name. You can add a country if you want. Um, Now, this is just one thing I know, but one thing you would have to work with on your own with whomever you're searching. Um, this individual, he primarily went by the name Han, Hahn, but his name also appears in records as Hann. Um, he just used those spellings interchangeably when he was a younger man. Excuse me. And also, same thing with given name. Um, his real name is Jacob, but he went by Jake. Um, one thing you can do with the Canadian archives and Library and Archives of Canada website is you can use special searches. You can use things like the star or the asterisks to replace letters and so on. So you can play around with that and make it easier. Anyway, I for my search, I went with Han, Hann, and I went with Jake, and lo and behold, I found something. And here's what it says. There's only the one entry. It says Jake Han, Romania, and it gives me a number. Um, you'll notice that the number, the item number, is it's set up as a URL link, right? You can tell you can click on that because it's underlined. So when you click on that and you action it, you'll see a screen that looks like this. Excuse me. It gives you the basic information about this file. It says Jake Han, he's from Romania. His record relates to 1920 and 1921. Now, why is that a range of 2 years? It's because the Canada Gazette wasn't published on the calendar year. It was published on a particular day. I can't remember if it was July 1st to July 1st or whether it was April 1st to March 31st. But anyway, it was published not on the calendar year. So that's why you always look at a gap in years, 1920, 1921. You can see the item number. But there again, up here, you can see that this is a hyperlink because it's in blue and it's underlined. So you can double click on that and it'll say you'll link to the PDF file. And what happens when you see the PDF file? You see a window that looks like this. Um, you might be able to make out that there's several names here, but the top names, it says Jake Han from Romania. It actually tells us what date he signed his oath of allegiance. It was the 23rd of November, 1920. Excuse me. It tells us that he was a shoemaker, and it tells us that he resided in Regina, Saskatchewan. We also see some information here about the series and number of his naturalization certificate. Now, you might think, okay, well, B6180, that just looks like bureaucratic stuff. You do want to make note of that because the difference between the A dot, you see the A dots here and the B dots, they tell you something. And in particular, I believe it's the B dot tells us that it wasn't just Jake who was naturalized. It was that when he was naturalized, his children were naturalized along with him. And that's what you see here because you see these names below: George Han, Jacob Han, Carl Han, Katie Han, Lizzie Han, Rudy Han, Rudolph Han, but I knew him as Uncle Rudy. Excuse me. Um, and they are described as minor children because at the time this took place, they were under 21 years of age. Um, they don't, this file doesn't specify that they are also from Romania, but you can imply that from the fact that they're grouped together with Jake here. Same thing with the date. You can imply that they were naturalized on the same date. Anyway, what you want to do is you want to record all this information carefully in your notes because we're going to see if we can use this to dig up some more records. Um, there's a clearer image of everything if you didn't see it before. Um, again, just reiterating this information. Excuse me. Um, you can see, the country and the date of the oath of allegiance and so on. Okay, so using that information, can we find the underlying court file? Because as I explained, when you wanted to become naturalized, you had to go before a judge and you had to give the oath of allegiance before that judge, and you would get the judicial order saying you were naturalized. Well, there are very few actual court records for naturalizations that survive, but one of the places where they do survive is Regina. And we're going to track down that record, and I'm going to show you how you do it. So the first thing is you do have to be comfortable in using the FamilySearch.org catalog. Now, I don't know if this is something that you've had a lot of experience just yet in your coursework, but it's something that you really do want to learn how to do in order to do any level of advanced research. The thing you should always remember about FamilySearch.org is that while there's some wonderful indexing and Now they even have full text search that can help you track things down. It's still the case that the majority of records in their collection are not indexed. So you do actually have to know how to wade through the stacks of documents and find stuff. But if you know how to do it, you'll find incredible gems. So we're going to search I'm going to show you how you can search the FamilySearch.org catalog. We're going to look for collections, record collections, excuse me, that will mention citizenship or naturalization. We're going to look for records where there might be an index or something that's going to help us track down the record that we're looking for. And we're going to consult that index if there is one. We're going to track down a court file, and we're going to view and abstract the record. No, that's the methodology in brief. I'm going to take you through it piece by piece, because I know I just tossed that out at you very quickly. All right. So when I did a search, I went to familysearch.org, and I went to the catalog, and in the place name area, I did a search for Saskatchewan. Um, then I looked at my results. And if you've seen these results, you'll see that when you have a jurisdiction, underneath that jurisdiction, there will be a list of all the different types of records that are available. There may be court records, there may be vital records, there may be church records. There's always a lot of church records. There may be some historical information. And in this particular case, under Saskatchewan, we wanted to look for naturalization and citizenship. And I found that there are actually 5 records, excuse me, including one that says it has the district court naturalization records for the judicial district of Regina. And it even has the dates that are covered, December 1919 and 1946. Well, we know from our prior search with the naturalization database that JCON's record is from 1920, 1921, so that's covered. And we also see that there's indexes. So up here you can see this record, right? And it says that there's indexes from 1885 to 1966. So the first thing there, actually, remember that that Library and Archives of Canada database stopped at 1951. So in this particular court record, you can go all the way up to 1966. So that's a bonus, number one. Bonus number two, because you have an index here, you're not going to have to tackle a stack of documents and wade through them one at a time. You're going to be able to zero in and find the one we're looking for. So let me just show you what I did was on here, because it's underlined, it's hyperlinked. I double clicked there, and then I saw this screen. And this is the screen that's really important when you're dealing with FamilySearch.org, because you can see this image group number, which refers to the collection, the digital collection that's actually housing where these files are going to live. You can see that there's a camera here and there's a camera there without any sort of warning sign or any indication that that material is limited to people actually working at the Family Search library itself, or there's any sort of restrictions on it. This is freely available from your home. Excuse me. And again, I can see information that tells me that I'm going to see the index for 1885 to 1966. And if I find what I'm looking for, the records themselves are available from 1919 to 1921. And in fact, it's going to tell me what the file numbers are, which is a really important thing to notice. Because when I'm looking at the index, how am I going to know how to find the right file? I'm probably going to be looking for a file number. Well, I can see that this gives me the range of files. And they even tells me that some of them are missing. So when you're doing this type of catalog search in FamilySearch.org, I know this throws a lot of information at you, but just take a beat, stop and give this a read and find out what it's sharing with you, because it's a way to know whether you're about to find what you're looking for. Actually, another thing that you should notice here. See where it says item 4 and item 5? Excuse me. Um, if you're used to using records like this, and if you've used a lot of the family search records where you're just looking at the raw screen of the screen after screen of records, you'll notice that you may have a film that has 5 different items on it, and the first 3 items are for something completely different. But the item that you're looking for is way at the end of the film, and you'll see a mark that where it says like 4 ends here, 5 starts here. So it's good to make note of the fact that you're going to be looking for item 4, excuse me, and item 5. And because these numbers are the same, um, excuse me, this tells me that you're going to be looking for this record on the same basically what used to be the same roll of film. So you're not going to have to jump to another record. All right. Excuse me. I've I've gone into the index. I've gone to the H's. I've looked through the H's and I found something down here. I found Jake Han. That's the guy we're looking for. And I can see a local file number. It tells me it's file number 156. Remember, I said you want to pay attention to what those file numbers are, because that's how you're going to actually find the record. Well, we've got it right there. That's the index. That's the index finding key. 156. That's what we're going to be looking for. But I also see a bit of information here. I can see his address. He lived at, looks like 2055 Stewart Street in Regina. It all, again tells me that he's a shoemaker. Now, actually, before it told me he was from Czernowitz, here it tells me he was from Bukovina, Austria. Bukovina was the state around Czernowitz. And actually gives me a couple more dates. It tells me when he filed his application. Now, in the naturalization database, it just told me when he swore his oath, and that said it was some date in November, I believe. But here it tells me that he actually filed his application on the 29th of March, 1920, and he came to court. They actually had a little hearing, and it tells me that that happened on the 13th of October, 1920. So this wasn't something that happened overnight. He filed his application, and it took a while before he got into court. And excuse me, um, there's a little A here that says that his application was approved. So he made it. You can see that not everybody got approved. There's this poor fellow here rejected. Some people didn't appear, so they are rejected, but shake hand was approved. We can see that. And we actually can see when the papers were mailed to the federal government. You can see the date when his certificate was issued, and you can see the certificate number itself that was ultimately issued for him. So that's information you might want to write down. In fact, that's what I've done here is I isolated this indexing record and I made notes in my research log. I made notes about all this information. Excuse me, because I know that's going to help me find the record. So just quick recap of what we've done so far. We started with the naturalization database. We found that there was a record for Jake Han. We went to familysearch.org. We found that there are court records for Regina, naturalization court records. So there would be a record for him. We searched the index. We found that, yes, there's an actual court file that we can look for. So we're zeroing in on this information. And when I've gone to the actual court records, here's what I found. There's the index. It is number 156, just like it said in the index. It says it's Jake Han of 2055 Stewart Street, Regina. The shoemaker, he's an Austrian from Bukovina, and his application is approved. By the way, you should notice too that every time I'm showing you a document I've pulled, I'm including a citation. Meaning I'll just always use citations. And what is a correct citation? Anything that helps another researcher find the same document that you did. Okay, so when I pull up the record, this is what it looks like. And this is genealogical goal. Excuse me. We learn that Jake, who also went by Jack or JAK, no E, Han, of 2055 Stewart Street, Regina. Um, this tells us where he lived, right? Because remember, I said at the outset that to become a naturalized British subject, you had to, at this time frame, you had to have resided in Canada for 5 years. Well, this shows us that he had been residing in Canada since at least 1912. In fact, he lived at Bayard, Saskatchewan until 1917, and then in February 1917, it tells us that he moved to Regina. That's something that I didn't actually know when I was a kid. So I've got the full record of where he lived in Saskatchewan. Um, he says, I was born at Czernowitz in the province of Bukovina, Austria, on the 10th of July, 1870. Excuse me. I do actually have his baptismal record, his parish record, and I know he was actually born in 1871. But still, if I didn't have that, this would be really compelling information because it's in the first person. Obviously, it's a weird thing. I mean, you're present at your own birth, but you're not really a witness to your own birth because you don't remember it. But still, a lot of people have a good sense of when they were born. So you would have that information in a sworn affidavit. I believe this is sworn. Um, Is this it's an application? Well, it's a sworn, it's a statement in the first person that he has issued. Now, he says that he previously was a subject of Austria. Notice that there's two kinds of what we would think of as citizenship. You can be a subject of a place or you can be a citizen of a place. Subject tends to be the word we use when that place is a monarchy. So he was a subject of whoever the monarch of Austria was. Um, Whoops. Provides us with details about his racial background. Very important back then because realize we just ended World War One. Um, he had to declare whether or not he was part of any army that was fighting against Canada, and he left that blank. Um, he says where he came from, and this is great. It says exactly which ship that he took. It was called the Lake Michigan. Which port he docked at. It was at St. John in New Brunswick, and what day he stepped off the boat. So we have all of this full story about how he came to Canada or those first moments he spent in Canada. And if I was looking for his passenger list information, I have lots of raw material now that I can use in order to aid myself in that search. And then we have the dates and so on. And hey, look, it was before the judge, his honor judge, does that say Henan? And we've got the date, and there we go. So this is just breaking down that information as I've just taken you through it. Excuse me. Um, just a wonderful document if you're looking for the the history of your family. Like when I started in genealogy, one of my key questions for all my particular ancestors was when did they come to Canada? I was really fascinated with that, and here's something I can pin down to the very day when my great grandfather Jake Han stepped off the boat in St. John, New Brunswick, on the 5th day of April, 1912. So pretty lovely. Anyway, that takes you through a naturalization case. One thing I will leave you with is that there are surviving records for the courts in Montreal, the Anglophone courts in Montreal. I don't know why that is, but it's lovely. There's not a lot of those records, but you will find records where, and they're great because you can actually see what the documents looked like because so few of them exist. So you can, I was looking at one the other day, a fellow named Jack Ma, uh, a merchant who swore his oath of allegiance to the British Crown and became a naturalized British subject. Um, you'll also see some very old records for Upper Canada. There's a few. There's a collection that exists. One thing I didn't explain at the beginning, but is a good takeaway. You might be wondering to yourself, why British subject and why did it take until 1947 for Canada to have citizenship? So many of the immigrants to Canada actually came from the British Isles that because they were subjects already of the monarch of Great Britain, when they arrived in Canada, who would they swear allegiance to? Well, they were already subjects of Britain. So from that limited legal viewpoint, um, they were already naturalized British subjects, so there was no need for them to go through any sort of process. Who do we see who did go through naturalizations? Well, people from non-British territories. Um, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and I'm just gonna. Does anybody? We are being recorded. I want to acknowledge that, but does anybody have any questions? You can leave them in the chat, or you can speak out loud. Do I see any? Okay, no questions. All right. Well, I hope that you found that useful. Um, this has been a virtual session for Canadian Records through Genealogical Institute, International Institute of Genealogical Studies. You can find more information about our programs and a career as a genealogist at genealogicalstudies.com.